On January the 27th, 1967, three astronauts suited up for what was meant to be a routine ground test of the brand new Apollo spacecraft. Gus Grissom, Ed White and Roger Chaffee were preparing to lead America's next step towards the moon. But within minutes, a spark inside the cabin turned the test into tragedy. Trapped by a hatch that couldn't be opened, all three astronauts lost their lives in a fire that shocked the world. It was NASA's darkest day, but the hard lessons learned from Apollo 1 would reshape the program and ultimately make the moon landing possible. This is the story of the Apollo 1 tragedy. Virgil Ivan Gus Grissom was born on April 3rd, 1926, in the small town of Mitchell, Indiana. The son of a railroad worker and a homemaker, he grew up in the lean years of the Great Depression, where discipline and responsibility became second nature. From an early age, Gus developed a fascination with airplanes and engineering, interests that would shape his future. After graduating high school, he enlisted in the US Army Air Forces during World War II. The conflict ended before he saw combat, but the experience deepened his determination to fly. Taking advantage of the GI Bill, he went on to study mechanical engineering at Purdue University, equipping himself with both the technical and practical knowledge that would later define his career. Once his degree was complete, Grissom returned to the military, this time with the US Air Force. There, he trained as a pilot and was eventually deployed to Korea, where he flew 100 combat missions in F-86 Sabres. His ability to stay calm under pressure, combined with sharp flying skills, earned him a reputation as a reliable and fearless aviator. As he recalled later, "You've got to be able to think faster than your aeroplane. If you can't, you'll be in trouble." These qualities would soon bring him to NASA's attention, paving the way for his place among America's first astronauts. By 1959, America was locked in a new kind of contest, not on Earth, but in space. The Soviet Union had already launched Sputnik, and the United States scrambled to respond. NASA unveiled its very first astronauts, the Mercury 7. From over 500 of the nation's top military test pilots, only 7 were chosen. Among them, Virgil Gus Grissom. Unlike some of his colleagues who embraced celebrity, Grissom was quiet, disciplined and laser-focused. He wasn't in it for fame, he was there to fly. On July 21st, 1961, Grissom climbed into a tiny capsule named Liberty Bell 7. Perched atop a Redstone rocket, he was about to become only the second American to reach space. The mission, a 15-minute suborbital flight that would carry him 118 miles above the Earth before splashing down in the Atlantic. The launch was flawless. The rocket roared to life, pushing Grissom into the heavens at more than 5,000 miles per hour. Inside the cramped cabin, barely big enough to move, he monitored dials and controls, calm and precise. At the peak of his flight, Liberty Bell 7 reached the edge of space. Through a small porthole, Grissom gazed at the curve of the Earth, the thin blue atmosphere, and the blackness beyond. For those brief minutes, he joined an elite brotherhood of humans who had left their planet behind. The re-entry went exactly to plan. The capsule slowed under parachutes, and Grissom braced for splashdown. As the spacecraft bobbed in the Atlantic, recovery helicopters moved into position. By all accounts, it had been a textbook mission. Then, in an instant, everything went wrong. As recovery teams approached, the explosive side hatch of Liberty Bell 7 suddenly blew open. Seawater rushed inside, flooding the capsule. Grissom, still strapped into his bulky suit, was thrown into the ocean. Water seeped into the suit, dragging him down. Struggling against the weight, he fought to stay afloat, gulping for air as waves crashed over him. For a terrifying moment, one of America's first astronauts was on the verge of drowning. Not in space, but within sight of rescue. Helicopter crews scrambled to save him. In the chaos, Liberty Bell 7 itself was lost, pulled beneath the waves and gone to the ocean floor. Grissom, exhausted and barely conscious, was finally hauled aboard a rescue chopper. He had survived, but the mission ended in controversy. Almost immediately, whispers spread inside NASA. The hatch had blown open, but why? The design required deliberate force from the inside. Had Grissom panicked? Had he triggered it himself? Grissom always denied it. he insisted he hadn't touched the hatch mechanism. The hatch just blew, he told investigators, standing firm against suspicion. Many believed him, but doubt lingered. Behind closed doors, some questioned whether he had cracked under the pressure. The incident haunted him for years, but later studies and inspections of similar hardware strongly suggested a mechanical fault, not human error. In 1999, when Liberty Bell 7 was finally recovered from the ocean floor, engineers found evidence that backed Grissom's story. Though the mission was overshadowed by its dramatic ending, Grissom had performed flawlessly in flight. He had proven his skill, his composure, and his reliability under pressure. To NASA, he was still one of their most capable astronauts. But for Gus Grissom, Liberty Bell 7 was a bitter reminder of just how thin the line was between triumph and disaster in the early days of spaceflight. After the controversy of Liberty Bell 7, Gus Grissom was determined to prove himself once again. That opportunity came on March 23, 1965, when he was selected to command Gemini 3, the very first crewed flight of NASA's new two-man spacecraft. His co-pilot was John Young, a rookie astronaut making his first spaceflight. Together they would test a spacecraft designed to do far more than Mercury ever could. Gemini was not just a capsule for short hops into space, it was a bridge to the moon. The mission lasted just under 5 hours, but in that time Grissom and Young pushed the Gemini capsule through its paces. They executed the first orbital maneuver by an American spacecraft, firing its thrusters to deliberately change their path in space. It was a vital step, proving that astronauts could one day rendezvous and dock with other vehicles in orbit, a skill essential for lunar missions. For Grissom, the flight was a chance to show his calm precision under pressure. Every checklist was carried out flawlessly. Every maneuver was executed exactly as planned. Still, his sense of humour managed to slip through. Before launch, Young had smuggled a corned beef sandwich into his suit pocket. Midway through the mission, he pulled it out and the astronauts shared a few bites, much to NASA's irritation, when crumbs started to float into the cabin. The incident became infamous, but it also revealed the human side of these pioneers, trapped for hours inside a machine barely larger than a closet. When Gemini 3 splashed down in the Atlantic, the mission was declared a success. Gus Grissom had become the first American to fly in space twice. His steady performance restored his reputation, proving once and for all that he was not only capable, but one of NASA's most dependable astronauts. Yet even in triumph, Grissom remained sober about the risks. In this business, there are always going to be losses. You prepare, you train, and then you fly, he reflected. Each mission reminded him and NASA that the path to the moon would demand perfection. By the mid-1960s, NASA had its sights set on the moon. The next program, Apollo, would carry astronauts farther than ever before. For its very first crewed mission, NASA turned to one of its most experienced pilots, Gus Grissom. His crew was a balance of veteran and rookie talent. Ed White, already celebrated as the first American to walk in space, took the role of senior pilot. The third seat went to Roger Chaffee, a skilled Navy aviator making his first flight into space. Together, they were tasked with proving Apollo's spacecraft could support human life in orbit, the first step on the long road to the lunar surface. But Apollo's spacecraft, built by North American Aviation, quickly became a source of concern. It was larger and more advanced than Gemini, but it came with a troubling list of flaws: electrical malfunctions, leaks, failed tests. Grissom grew increasingly uneasy with what he saw. In one pointed act of protest, he hung a lemon on a faulty simulator, a blunt message to engineers that the spacecraft wasn't ready. He was equally candid in interviews. "If we die, we want people to accept it. We are in a risky business, and we hope that if anything happens to us, it will not delay the program. The conquest of space is worth the risk of life," he told reporters. Still, professionalism defined him. Despite his doubts, Grissom threw himself into the mission with focus and discipline, determined to lead his crew as best he could. That Friday afternoon, the crew assembled at Cape Kennedy's Launch Complex 34. The test was a routine plugs-out simulation, a ground check to confirm the spacecraft could operate on its own power, detached from all external support. With no fuel loaded and pyrotechnics disabled, the exercise was considered safe. At 1 p.m, Grissom, White and Chaffee climbed into the capsule. Almost immediately, Grissom reported a strange, sour smell in his oxygen line. Engineers investigated but found no source, so the countdown resumed. As the hours dragged on, more issues emerged. The communication system crackled with static, leaving astronauts and ground crews struggling to hear one another. Growing impatient, Grissom's voice cut through the noise. How are we going to get to the moon if we can't talk between 2 or 3 buildings? By early evening, the test was still running, and at 6:31 p.m, disaster struck. A spark, likely from faulty wiring, ignited in the spacecraft's pure oxygen atmosphere. Within seconds, the cabin became an inferno. The high-pressure oxygen environment turned even ordinary materials into fuel. Velcro, netting, and wiring insulation flared like paper. Flames surged along the cabin walls, the pressure spiked, and the hatch, designed to open inwards, jammed shut under the force. Inside, the crew fought desperately. Ed White struggled to open the hatch, but the design made escape impossible. The fire spread in just 15 seconds. The men's shouts turned to screams, and then silence. Outside, rescuers scrambled to respond. Thick black smoke poured from the capsule, making it nearly impossible to see or breathe. Several ground crew suffered burns as they tried to reach the astronauts. Their gas masks failed to filter the toxic fumes, and it took 5 long minutes to force open the hatch. By then, it was too late. Gus Grissom, Ed White, and Roger Chaffee were gone. The Apollo 1 fire shocked the nation and nearly derailed the moon program, as the tragedy forced NASA to halt crewed Apollo flights for 20 months, while sweeping redesigns and safety changes were made. Investigations uncovered a lethal mix of poor design choices, faulty wiring, flammable materials, and a pure oxygen environment that had turned the spacecraft into a death trap. For Gus Grissom, it was the final chapter in a career marked by courage and honesty. From Mercury to Gemini to Apollo, he had been a steady hand, a blunt critic when safety was ignored, and a leader who never shied from risk. Died as he had lived, on the front line of America's push into space. Gus Grissom was only 40 years old when the Apollo 1 fire cut his life short. He became one of the first astronauts to give his life in the pursuit of space exploration, a sacrifice that forced NASA to confront its vulnerabilities. The investigation into the tragedy uncovered critical flaws: faulty wiring, flammable materials, and a hatch design that had sealed the crew inside. They were exactly the dangers Grissom had warned about. His concerns, dismissed in life, were tragically validated in death. From that loss came sweeping change. Apollo spacecraft were redesigned from the ground up. Safer materials replaced flammable ones, oxygen levels were reduced, and the hatch was rebuilt to open outwards in seconds. Stricter safety protocols became the standard, ensuring that no astronaut would be trapped the way Grissom, White, and Chaffee had been. When Apollo finally reached the moon in 1969, Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin carried with them a mission patch honouring Grissom, White, and Chaffee. They left it on the lunar surface, a silent tribute to the men who paid the ultimate price so that others could succeed. Grissom never lived to see the moon landing, but his influence was written into every success that followed. He was the second American in space, the first to fly twice, and a man whose blunt honesty and steady leadership helped pave the path from Mercury to Gemini to Apollo's triumph on the moon. His legacy is a reminder that space exploration comes with unimaginable risk, and that progress is often paid for with the courage and sometimes the lives of those willing to take the first steps. The story of Virgil Gus Grissom is one of brilliance, grit, and tragedy. From the quiet streets of Indiana to the front lines of the space race, he rose to become one of NASA's most trusted astronauts. He flew in Mercury, commanded Gemini, and stood ready to lead Apollo into a new era. But his sharp warnings about Apollo's dangers would be ignored until it was too late, validated in the fire that claimed his life. In a bitter twist, the inward opening hatch that trapped the Apollo 1 crew had been introduced after Grissom's Liberty Bell 7 flight, when doubts about the safety of quick-release hatches first emerged. NASA's greatest triumphs, the moon landings and beyond, were built on lessons paid for by his sacrifice. Gus Grissom never walked on the moon, but every step taken there carried his legacy. In the end, he was more than an astronaut. He was a reminder that progress in space would never come without courage and sometimes the ultimate price. Obviously, this was a very tragic tale. 3 very brave and courageous men killed by poor design of the aircraft. Our condolences go out to any family relations of the 3 men that died. I hope you enjoyed the way the information was presented in this video. I'll look forward to seeing you on the next one, and I'll say bye-bye for now.